All right, welcome to Del Beccaro and Hook. We're live on Rumble and YouTube. And of course, don't forget to check out our Patriot page, patriot.tv/DHED. That's DHED. And of course, on our friends over there at Ex American News, you can check us there as well. And Tom, you'll be excited to hear we've got a brand new landing page. DellandHook.com. DellandHook.com is live, up and running. So everything, all the links and everything are there. Well, I want to hit a couple of things here, Tom, and I know you're probably hot to trot on these issues as well. Obviously, the first thing is the devastation that's happening in Southern California with these fires. I mean, it reminds me of seeing firebombed cities from World War II. It is just, it's like the Maui fires from a couple of years ago, but over a much larger area. It's just so devastating. And also, we're going to talk about what's happening in New York City this weekend with Marchand and the sentencing of Trump. What a sham. Chief Justice Roberts should hang his head in shame. He never will. And Amy Coney Barrett, I don't know what the hell happened to her. She is now part of the Beltway cocktail circuit, is my guess. But we're going to touch all of that. But Tom, hey, first of all, buddy, how are you? I don't want to filibuster here. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. I'm happy about Del and Hook. My name's shorter than yours for once, but things are looking up for the program. But we have to start out with this difficult story and talk about Southern California. I took some grief, as you know, in social media because I've been on Newsom and the rest saying I should wait on my criticism. Well, first of all, I've been on this issue for over a decade. When I ran against Kamala Harris back in 2016, I put out a water plan, which you can viewers can get at my Facebook page. The 11-page water plan is there. It includes better water management for the entire state. So this issue has been near and dear to my heart. I've done a ton of media in the last couple of days on this particular issue. But they said, well, now's not the time for partisanship, except for the Democrats, Bass and, Newsom blamed it on climate change. And that this was somehow beyond their capacity. But here's the problem with this. Newsom says we don't have a fire season anymore. He says it's permanent. It happens all the time. Okay. It does happen all the time. Look at Malibu, which was again hit by fire. December 9th, very serious fire. 8 days later, the LAFD fire chief wrote a memo about how the $17 million in cuts to their budget was hampering their ability to operate, not to mention the fact that a huge percentage of their number one call is going out and helping drug overdoses and the like. And then now this fire happens again. So if I apply by the rules of the people who say I shouldn't say these things, when is it going to be okay for me to say anything? Because it's happening every month.
Yeah.
You know, and statewide in California, 2.7 million Californians, that's bigger than 15 states, live in high danger fire areas. 2.7 million, including me. And yet there isn't a massive change in priorities since 2020 to 2023, when this overgrowth has exploded. We've had fires ranging from 90,000 acres, that was the low in those 24 years, to 1.49 million acres. That was the high. Average yearly, 954,000 acres on average. Yeah. So when's going to be a good time to talk about this? The answer is now. We not only have to hold these people accountable, but California needs to change its policy. If you're going to have homes near wooded areas, you have to thin those areas out statewide on a constant basis. You need to bring additional water infrastructure and firefighting infrastructure so that these tragedies don't happen. That doesn't mean there's not going to be fires. I'm not saying that the rough Santa Ana winds, and Santa Ana winds are as old as time. They precede humans. I'm not saying that this fire wouldn't have happened or wouldn't have been devastating, but that's not the only fire. And yet they didn't have the resources. The tanks ran dry. They shouldn't have run dry, and they certainly shouldn't run dry again.
Well, I'll tell you, Tom, I just absolutely echo everything you just said there. And remember this, ladies and gentlemen, this is the party, and I'm sorry, I will dive into politics because everything with them is politics. This is the party that wants to run every part of your life, whether it be your light bulbs, your toilets, whatever kind of heating unit, AC unit you have. Oh, you better get a vaccine. And by the way, here's a booster. They want to run everything. And then when stuff goes south, like it did in these fires, they're saying, hey, why are you making this political? It's political because your policies have enabled this to be much worse than it was. There hasn't been a major water infrastructure in the state of California since 1979. 79. No reservoirs built, even though they swore they were going to do that. Never got done. What about desalination plants right off of LA? I mean, they're right next to the ocean, for God's sakes. So it is going to be political, and I suspect that a lot of people in that part of California may start to rethink. But unfortunately for California, they may be gone because a lot of those people are not going to move back. Let's to that point.
Well, wait a minute. Yeah, stay right there.
Yeah.
Because the next step in this tragedy is, especially for those homes that were on the Pacific Coast Highway, they're not going to get permits to rebuild. They're going to sit there. The environmentalists are going to say it's too dangerous to put a house or a business there.
Yeah.
Now think about this. The environmentalists stopped they stopped them from clearing brush.
Forest maintenance.
Yeah. Or just even the woods between homes. But yes, they restrict that. They restrict PG&E from doing that near power lines. And then these tragedies occur, and then they'll come in and say, well, it's too risky. No, it's too risky because of your actions. If your actions change, this would be feasible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll see. Now, one of the residents that, you see this, I don't give a rip what side of the political aisle you're on. When I see whole neighborhoods going up in smoke, it's just heart-wrenching. A woman in California confronted Gavin Newsom on the street. You talk about a made-for-TV moment. Fires raging behind the governor. He's got his cell phone in his hand, and she cold busts him. Watch this, Tom. This is kind of amazing.
Governor, I live here, Governor. That was my daughter's school, Governor. Please tell me what you're going to do. I'm not going to hurt him, I promise.
I'm literally talking to the president right now to specifically answer the question of what we can do for you and your daughter.
Can I hear it? Can I hear your call? Because I don't believe it.
Wow. I don't believe it. Now, I'll tell you, if that kind of anger and frustration, you can hear the grief. I mean, there's so many emotions running through her voice. But it even got better, Tom. Watch the follow-up to this. Go.
So I have to get cell service.
So let's get it. Let's get it. I want to be here when you call the president.
I appreciate it. I'm doing that right now. And it's to immediately get reimbursements, individual assistance, and to help you. I'm devastated for you. I'm so sorry, especially for your daughter. I have 4 kids losing the school.
Everyone who went to school there, they lost their homes. They lost 2 homes because they were living in one and building another. Governor, please tell me, what are you going to do with the president right now?
We're getting the resources to help rebuild.
Why was there no water in the hydrants, Governor?
That's all literally.
Is it going to be different next time?
It has to be. Has to be. Of course.
What are you going to do?
I'm doing
to
everything
fill the hydrants. I would fill them up personally. You know that.
I literally have.
I would fill up the hydrants myself.
I would. I understand.
But would you do that?
I would do whatever I can.
But you're not. I see the. Do you know there's water dripping over there, Governor? There's water coming out there. You can use it.
I mean, Tom, calling him out, and he's just, we're going to get the resources, because everything to them is we're going to throw money at the problem. We're not going to change our environmental policy, mind you. We're not going to do that. But we are going to make your fire hydrants look pretty, and they won't work, but it'll be a nice greenway there. Tom.
Yeah, we're going to talk to. In our next segment, a good friend of mine, Congressman Doug LaMalfa, about the broader issue here. But going back to that woman, first of all, Gavin Newsom flat out lied to her. I'm literally talking to the president right now. Oh, I don't, and then he is forced to admit I don't have coverage. And she's so distraught, she didn't even pick up on that. And what are they going to do different? And the answer is if they don't take on the environmentalists, the answer is they're not going to do much different.
I would just say this, Tom. And I'm not trying to be political with this, but I'd say Kamala Harris's chances of winning there just dropped considerably as far as her governorship goes. If there was any plans there, unless she comes out and says the Sierra Group can go to hell, because there's furious people there, rightly so.
Yeah,
I'd say.
And like, this governorship has been careening from crisis to crisis. First it was homelessness, retail crime, fires, water crisis, and of course COVID, where he locked us down more than any place else without results that were better than places like Florida that opened up. And he doesn't manage these crises well. And then you're right. He, maybe he throws money at things, $24 billion in homelessness, and the problem's worth. That's $172,000 per homeless person, and the problem is freaking worse. And so this just goes on and on and on, and he just flat out lied to the woman and it's captured on national TV behind his glasses. If that was me, I would have taken off my glasses to look her in the eye and said, I'm going to be calling. We need to get emergency aid in here first, and then say what else I would do. But of course, he's vacuous, doesn't have any other plans. Is it going to be different? It has to be. And then he goes into his, bureaucrat
it's like
statement.
He's straight out of Central Casting. Just a slimy. I just didn't, and you can hear the emotion in her voice. Well, listen, Tom, real quick, about a minute and a half, Marshawn, we got to touch on it.
Well, I think we should hold over that to the end, because I do want to make an additional point on the fire related to the last time we got to talk about Karen Bass, because Karen Bass cut the fire budget by $17 million, but she increased the library budget by $14 million. So that was the trade-off. So, okay, it's 2025, and we're funding libraries, why, to compete with the internet? I mean, when was the last time you went and checked out a book, right? What those really have become are daycare centers. At least up in Northern California.
And it's a slush fund for them. Yeah,
ridiculous. Okay, so we're running out of time here. This is Del Beccaro and Hook. We're on YouTube. We're on Rumble, Patriot.tv. And you announced at the outset we have a new...
Ex-America News, baby.
There you go. All right, folks. We'll be back with Congressman Doug LaMalfa, who I'm sure is going to be... excited. I was going to say on fire, but I'm not allowed to do that.
No.
All right.
He'll be good.
All right. Here we go, folks.
Red counties and the forested areas to the north, it's devastating portions of Los Angeles. Everybody's seeing it on the news. Every year we know the Santa Ana winds are going to blow. Every year we know that there's going to be risk. So what is our governor doing to help stop the risk? Virtually nothing, other than showing up at press conferences and waving his arms around and having long practiced monologues about, oh, it's someone else's fault, this or that. So it's time for the governor to either bear down or get out of the way, because California keeps suffering. My county's up north, Carr Fire, Camp Fire, Dixie Fire, 1 million acres, and now it's hitting the constituents of Southern California hard. Why does this have to keep happening? Why is not anything being done to really mitigate the issue of forest management, of brush management, and lower the risk? Why is the water being cut off at the hydrants? Is it because he won't allow us to build the water storage we need for a growing population and for growing crops? We need to build Sites Reservoir. We need to raise Shasta Dam. We need to not let all the water keep rushing out to the Pacific Ocean through the Delta to supposedly save a smelt that doesn't exist. We need to get cracking on this. Governor Newsom, either get at it or get out of the way.
Welcome back, everybody, to Del Beccaro and Hook. Today, we're pleased to be joined from a longtime friend of mine, former assemblyman in California, but now a six-term congressman. His district is in the northwest or the northern part of California. It's Congressman Doug LaMalfa. I, in my mind, think of him as an old-fashioned congressman. And what I mean by that is when the country, and you see behind him the flag that he has, when the Constitution was written, it was written in a world where farmers were predominant. And the LaMalfa family has been a farmer in Northern California. I don't know how many years. Maybe he can tell us that. But he has that sense of what America was and should be. So everyone, please welcome, I almost said Senator someday, Congressman Doug LaMalfa. Doug, how are you doing today?
Tom, good to see you. Thank you. That was one of my jobs as state senator for a window of time too. Maybe that just shows I can't keep a steady job. I don't know, but no. So we knew you from those days in Sacramento, and now your great work you're doing in all the forms of media and authorship you're doing. So appreciate that. And
thanks so much. So obviously, one of the reasons we brought you on today is to talk about the fires in Los Angeles, but people need to know that you have a vast experience with respect to forestry and public policy. So maybe you could start out by, and we also need to note that you had some biting comments about Gavin Newsom with respect to this particular fire, but you've been on him for years with respect to this issue. Maybe you could explain to people a little bit about your experience with forest management and your comments about why Newsom should lead or get out of the way.
You know, that just comes from the heart. It isn't really some political statement or a chance just to dig at Newsom, which there's probably plenty of reasons to do so. But, you know, well, you should look up in your archives there, look for a photograph of November 2018 in Paradise, California, of Newsom, Jerry Brown, Trump, and then the local mayor of Paradise, all standing there. Look at the devastation just a few days after the big Paradise fire known as the Camp Fire. And that's readily available in the media. And so that's been a little over 6 years. And so what lessons have been learned? And you hear Trump out there talking all the time, and they try and make fun of Trump like, oh, raking the forest floor. Like, well, there actually is equipment called a rake that they use. It's, you know, high-powered equipment that they would use in helping to buck up the brush and things like that. So the question, I guess, is that it was just a transition when Newsom was taking the handoff from Jerry Brown just a couple months before he was sworn in, right? So what has Newsom learned, or what has he implemented in those 6 years, other than waving his arms around and blaming somebody else the way he does for what's going on? And they are so tied to the environmental groups and environmental movement that that's a big part of the problem, is that the type of work we need to be doing in the forested areas or the brushy areas, like in Southern California, where they have 12 months risk of fire. The Santa Ana winds, as you know, they're really susceptible to coming up in the fall and the winter, maybe year round. I'm not a SoCal person, but you always hear about the Santa Ana winds and the great risk they have. San Diego had a big fire problem a couple of years ago. Lake Arrowhead area, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. And so what are we doing to manage these lands to make them less fire prone. You know, you're going to have fires. You're always going to have that. Nature causes it. Mankind accidentally causes fires. So what do you do to make a less fire risk situation? In our forests in the north, in the brushy areas of the south, what materials are you building your homes and your buildings out of? And what infrastructure do you have in place that is going to be there when you do have to put out a fire? How strong is it going to be? Or is it like we've seen with the LA city or county, whichever level, has it was a city that downsized their spending on firefighting about $18 million, and they dismissed a bunch of firefighters because they wouldn't take the COVID jab. And they have a DEI program that in place to make sure that they have people of particular gender or particular sexual orientation being hired on there, which is failing miserably from what I'm reading. And so when the focus is all on that, and then of course with the fire hydrants running out, you know, on site there, they had in the general area, what they're talking about, they had 3 1 million gallon tanks that for water storage for firefighting purposes. And so those all ran out in a fairly short amount of time. What's a million gallons mean? I think I did say gallons, right? Because I always put it into acre feet as a farmer, you know. So a million gallon tanks, but those are about 3 acre feet per as measured in agricultural terms. An acre foot is a 1 acre area, about 210 by 210 feet, 1 foot high of water. The average crop uses 3, 4, 5 acre feet per year to grow a crop. And so the volume of water that we are losing out through the Delta, you know, right in your neighborhood, is hundreds, thousands, even millions of acre feet are just being swept out to the ocean and not captured. Some of you can't capture because once the lakes you fill up, like, you know, Folsom and Oroville and Shasta, which aren't full yet, but it's still kind of early in the season, they have to leave a certain amount of space for flood control and then fill it towards the end of the spring, which I'm always on them about not dumping all the water ahead of time. So that said, we're losing hundreds of, you know, millions of acre feet. And we do have a facility called San Luis Reservoir, just kind of east of your residence area there, Tom. And it's only about maybe 60% full, right? I haven't looked at the number very lately, but they're not running the pumps. You fill that reservoir by running 2 sets of pumps in the Delta, one's state owned, one's federal owned. They're only running them at like 5%. Why are they not filling that reservoir? Why aren't they also filling the whole state aqueduct and shipping that water to other places? It's not, you know, it's always, in a lot of minds, going back to older water wars, it's north versus south on water, right? And so the people in the north, like me, like farmers in small towns, are worried, oh, they're going to take all our water and send it to Southern California. That's really not the battle. The battle is East California versus West California, because West California is where all the population is that hires these people, that elects these people to make these horrible decisions on water supply, that elects people like Newsom to appoint his water commission and water control board that are making these horrible decisions on our water supply. So that all translates out as maybe not enough water should have been getting down to Southern California to fill their lakes. In a lot of cases, you know, they do all right. Sometimes their lakes are full when ours aren't, but there's enough water for everybody when we manage it right. North doesn't have to worry about South. North has to worry about the environmentalists, worry about the people that live on the coast that elect these folks. So the issue really means, are we doing everything we can to have the water supply so that in this case here, if LA is filling those tanks from a canal or even from wells, that they would have the ability to do it. And you don't have people making decisions on there. Well, let's send a bunch of fire equipment to Ukraine. Fire equipment to Ukraine? Are you kidding me? And let's make sure we have the capacity of pumps to refill those million-gallon tanks that hold, you know, 3 acre feet, and keep them topped off when a big catastrophe like this happens. Are the valves big enough for the fire trucks to hook up to and pump the volume they need to? Do we need to have some that are adapted to salt water? I hear there's some controversy that go, well, they shouldn't use salt water because then the soil gets full of salt. Like, well, maybe in some cases it'd be helpful. It wouldn't have a negative effect using salt water. But is that even on the table for them? Are they using every possible thought and idea for that? And it looks like they aren't. They're more worried about their DEI. They're more worried about making, you know, Ukraine politics or what have you. And it's so frustrating because what LA is suffering is what we see unfortunately, very often. Town of Paradise burned to the ground in 2018. A couple years ago, the town of Greenville in Plumas County, next door to another town called Canyon Dam. All those towns were between 100% gone, 75% in Greenville, 90% gone in case of Paradise. And so, I mean, with the media coverage of Pacific Palisades and the other areas in the region, I'm really, really sorry it takes that to happen to get the public's attention, to get the politicians' attention on how bad this is. It can be in urban areas, not just flyover areas like my Northern California district and the others in the West.
Doug, you mentioned Paradise, and I've been talking a lot about it on air. It happened 6 years ago. It was a fast-moving fire. And so the question I asked, what do we learn? Didn't we learn that when you build homes in wooded areas, you need more infrastructure for fighting fires in those areas than if you're on the floor of the Central Valley? And why? What has changed? You know the budget process in Sacramento. You lived it for many years. They have a $325 billion budget coming up this year.
Yeah, yeah.
So shouldn't this be a massive priority? Because he blames it on climate change. He says climate change is going to be the best they can do is fix it over 50 years. Okay, between now and then, what's your fire plan?
Let's play climate change for a minute then. Okay, do you want to? We'll play along. So if you have climate change, and to me, it really doesn't matter what's causing it. If it's nature, if it's sunspots, if it's the rainforest, if it's oceanic currents and magma underground, whatever's causing it, right? Or it's my mom's hairspray or your SUV. If it's happening.
I thought you were going to say my hairspray, but go on.
No, you always got the good hair. I'm not going to play. But whatever's causing, if you want to play, which I'm not a climate change guy, okay? I think CO2 being represented by 0.04% of the atmosphere is not a giant end all for mankind. CO2 is necessary for plant life, and everything's made out of carbon. This wooden table, everything. So carbon is not bad. That all said. All right, let's play with your climate change narrative for a minute. Then we can't control necessarily the weather, right? But what we can do is control our other conditions of how much water we store. If climate change is causing the snowpack to not stay snow very long, and we get it via rain instead of snow because it's warmer, then we have to capture the rain right now instead of the time release way of snow keeping our reservoirs full all summer as the time release of water comes down. So you're going to need more buckets to hold the water because it's all going to go away fast, right? That's the water side of it. On the forestry side of it, on the land use, on the land management side of it, then if we have too many trees growing per acre, they're going to starve themselves of water because there's too many trees in too small of an area competing for a limited groundwater supply or whatever snowpack was there. So we have to have the right ratio of trees per acre that's, here's a fancy word, sustainable, okay, for being able to live in a drought condition or a permanently dry condition caused by climate change. We aren't doing those things. We aren't building more water supply to hold buckets of rain versus snow. We aren't managing the forests and the brush lands because it's all an environmental thing. It's all about the fish on the Klamath River that they tore hydroelectric dams out up there. And Newsom has video on that. I'm putting that down on my social media of how proud he is of tearing those dams out. We now have less hydroelectric power, less water storage, and those lakes that were there are also able to be drawn from for fighting fire in that Siskiyou County, Oregon border area. We don't have that tool now. So firefighting is going to be harder up there due to that. And we're not going to see more fish out of that. We're not going to see more smelt down in the Delta because of the massive hundreds of thousands and millions of acre feet going through there. The smeltable were pretty much pronounced gone. And this is after, George Miller back in 1992 passed legislation to start dumping more and more and more water through there and taking away from farmers, taking away from these other uses. So what do you want to do about climate change? Nothing, because climate change is just a tool to continue to take control of our resources and make us do something completely different.
Yeah, Congressman LaMalfa, it's great to have you. And I just want to pick up right where you left off there. Has anybody checked on the Delta smelt or the spotted owls or all this? I'm wondering if what we're seeing, this devastation, I mean, it truly is a hellscape there in parts of LA. And I mean, I saw they did an overlay map of how much had burned, compared it to Manhattan, and it basically was the entire island of Manhattan. If you overlay it over London, it's all of London and most of the suburbs east and west. It's massive. What do you think is going to be the change? Do you think people are going to wake up to this? Because this is a failure. They always love to say, let's not go political with this. Well, those residents are looking at the local politicians. They're furious. What do you think is going to happen?
Let's not call them politicians. Let's not even talk, Republican or Democrat. Who are the people that are in charge? Forget their registration. Who are the people that have been placed in charge to take care of and look after these things? Okay, you have a governor, you have the legislature, you have the people they appoint and the people they fund to go do these things. You have them making laws and rules to carry out those things in particular ways. And then you get down to the county level and the city level, you have the same group of people that have been chosen somehow by elections to do these jobs, right? And so if you aren't getting, if you're a CEO of a company and nobody is producing anything on the assembly line, you would say, I guess I need different people on the assembly line to make the things I need. Or if the stockholders are saying the guy leading the company is doing a terrible job of being a CEO, then you better get rid of that CEO and get somebody that can keep the airplanes in the air or the tires on the cars or whatever. So that doesn't have to be a political statement. In this case here, these are politicians that carry out this incompetence that we're seeing. So you've got to change the politicians if you want to really see something different. Now that's where it gets more partisan. Like, well, if you keep going with the Democrats on this, you're going to keep getting people that are worried about having a 100% scorecard with the Sierra Club or the National Resources Defense Council or whatever. And that means those organizations aren't going to let them cut a tree or build a dam or do, build another lane on the freeway that you would like, or build more housing, any of those things. They're going to come down. Those politicians are afraid they're going to get primaried by a new politician that will say or do anything to get a 100% scorecard. So that's what's so tough about this.
So what you end up getting, Congressman, are rainbow painted fire hydrants that don't work. And neighborhood after neighborhood, square mile after square mile being turned to cinder and ash. I'm just wondering if that's going to wake up the people of California. I mean, I'm always wondering this, I guess.
Well, as I kind of mentioned,
I wondered the same thing.
We've known out about it for years and years. You can look at Paradise, you look at the area of Santa Rosa, you can look at the towns I mentioned that no one's heard of, Greenville and Canyon Dam, and others that are just basically gone, right? And so that doesn't get as much news. Now, the LA Times was up there covering Greenville, for example, but I don't know how many people read those articles. Now this is international attention because it's so dramatic for Pacific Palisades and those areas. And my heart goes out to them, same as it does up here in the north, up in our northern area. They don't need that in their life, and it's horrible for them. But I mean, those are the areas that elect these people that make these decisions, unfortunately. And I don't want to make it political either. But doggone it, if you want to change it, then you have to change the people making the bad decisions. And when you look at party, I mean, I'm sorry, it's party. There's some Dems that believe what I'm talking about. And there's some Republicans that don't care. But by and large, 90% on each side are going to be beholden to the environmental groups or to the concept of what we're talking about, of having smart management of lands and the infrastructure to do it, and not caring what the color or the gender or the orientation is of the fire truck or the firefighter that's coming to do the job. It's just based on merit, and that's fair to everybody if they want to do the work.
So Doug, you've talked to these people over the years. Why these environmentalists, why did they not get the fact that prior to us roaming the land, there were these natural fires that cleaned out the brush, and that was a part of the cycle? Why do they not understand that overgrowth leads to much worse results environmentally than, we used to have a timber industry and this problem wasn't as big. Why do they not get that?
A tiny handful do. We were successful. I had a bill in the state assembly that opened up the doorway just a little bit to some timber management, and we worked with the Sierra Club. One fellow there, in fact, Sacramento, we got along with really good. We opened the door to making it just a little bit easier to get what was called a timber harvest permit, and not have to do they don't actually read the timber harvest permit. They just weigh it. And if it's heavy enough, then they consider, well, that's a good plan, right? So we were able to open the door, just crack it a little bit to make it easier on small parcels to do some tree work and thinning work. But, honestly, my bill did not completely change the world. And this is what we see. So we're hoping to build upon that. But we have to build much more dramatically. So I think what it boils down to is that for the environmental movement, anything that looks like development or something that helps the human population to be bigger or thrive, they put a stop to. That's why they don't like highways, freeways, water storage. They fight you on simple things like levee projects, flood control. In Hamilton City, not far from Chico, they fought for 25 years to fix a levee that would have wiped out their town, like a lot of towns would be. So instead, they had to move the levee. They had to backspace it away from where the levee was and take in all this orchard land. And then because there's elderberry bushes on it and there's an endangered supposedly elderberry beetle, they had to plant hundreds and hundreds of these bushes to replace, like, at a 70-to-1 ratio, the bushes that used to be there. So you get so tied up with all this stuff that it doesn't help people. And I think this country, these people that we are more environmentally conscious just about than anywhere in the world, but it goes so over the top unreasonable that we're just harming ourselves. We export our industries, like places like China and stuff, that are much, much dirtier than us. And they have less labor laws that protect kids and others. You get the whole thing. So the environmental groups are just, by and large, not very reasonable about this stuff. And so they have to be defeated in the legislative process unless, they want to be reasonable. They become reasonable sometime. I don't know what their agenda is other than it ties into, I think, something a lot more sinister on an international level.
Deindustrialization.
De-Americanization. Because it's been a useful tool for China to sit back and laugh at us, and even the Gorbachev era to sit back, because he got all environmental, and they're not going to adhere to this stuff. They're just looking at us foolish Western countries that play with. Look at how close Germany was on the brink of not being able to keep their homes heated 2, 3, 4 years ago, because they got rid of their nuclear generation industry, and then they became dependent on Russian gas, or they were trying to. How absurd is that? Do they look at history and see the history between Russia and the Western European countries, and how if you're going to be dependent on that great big valve that they can just shut off at any time if they don't like what you're doing politically or whatever, that's crazy. The U.S. needs to be developing much more natural gas and putting it on those big ships and sending it over to Europe and being their partner. We're in NATO with them, for crying out loud. We've been partners with them for a long, long, long time. And so these international alliances need to be made stronger by not having these crazy environmental policies that hurt that ability too. I know I'm getting all over the map on this issue.
No, this is great.
It all ties together.
I could talk to you forever. Do a Reader's Digest version. I remember years ago you told me the story after a forest fire. The timber industry said we can still come in and harvest some of those trees, clear the ground, and they were denied. And even though they told them, if you just leave that ash there, it'll set the forest back eight more years, and yet they still wouldn't agree to it.
Tom, you could fly over the map here, because a lot of these lands are owned by in checkerboard pattern. Private land here, then Forest Service or other federal lands here. And when a fire sweeps through that whole area, fly over that area back in 2 or 3 years, you see the private lands. If they have the ability, they're going to be out there and they are out there clearing and replanting. And within 12 years, you're going to see it greened up. You're going to see these small trees, trees up to 10 feet tall, whatever, by that point, see it coming back. Look at the federal land. They didn't do squat there. You still see the old dead snags are starting to fall over. Brush is growing between, brush that is very highly contagious for fire because it's so oil rich and it burns so hot in the brush. And so that's going to be the next fire. And they make really bad neighbors with the private land, because when they don't maintain, their fire that starts on federal land flows through into the private lands, and then they're out of business again too. So a prime example was a fire in the North Bay area, I think Mendocino County, maybe 6 or 7 years ago now, that it was a 700,000 acre fire. And they wanted to go in after the fire had already occurred and do a small project, which was about 2% of that land. I think about a 4,000 acre project out of 700,000, right? And they fought for a year and a half or 2 years of permitting to get after this. And when it was finally done, somebody sued, oh, you didn't do in your permit and survey process, you didn't check for this species, what would happen with your salvage up. This is already salvaging dead or dying timber. And so with three judge panel from San Francisco said, yeah, you got to go back and study it again. So what you've lost is the ability to gain any value, any income from the trees that were still good after the fire. The bigger trees, you can still, for 6 months, a year, maybe a year and a half, you can still gain decent wood out of a lot of the bigger trees that didn't go up completely, but are going to be dead. And so that was an environmental thing, even post-fire. It's so unreasonable that we will just continue to greatly harm ourselves in this country with the federal lands that belong to all of us, because we have to kowtow to the environmental movement. And the U.S. Forest Service is afraid to hardly make a move. They're really unaggressive on the what we call the pace and scale with which it should be treating the lands, harvesting, thinning, what have you. And for some sick reason, the U.S. is now the #1 importer of wood products as we watch all this happen. It was #2 until China's economy tailed off a little bit. And now we've supplanted China as the #1 importer. It's craziness. We should be putting our people to work in our backyards. Like my district here, you drive through these small towns that were thriving lumber towns in the 60s, 50s, 40s, maybe even partly the 70s. And all these businesses that are boarded up and unemployed people that, what happens with that is that incidences of domestic violence and drug use, all that in these small towns. These are good people. There's good people that have had their livelihood taken away from them, and for no good reason, because we still need the wood products. We need the paper products. Heaven knows we waste a lot of paper around here, so it just needs to be done. It needs to come from America, like our energy, so many things. And we're tied up by, at this point, such out of control environmental organizations and their ability to win in court and have politicians that are afraid to deal with it, So I hope Trump puts some strong people in here that are willing to fight this stuff and set us back on course for energy, for agriculture, water, timber, the whole thing, mining. Heck, we need a lot more mining. 29 years it takes to get a copper mine approved. And they have all these electrical mandates they want to shove down our throats in California. And they would be doing so at the federal, if not for the stopgap the Republican House has been, now plus the Senate, now the White House. So, all the bad things that are happening under Biden, I look at it this way. At least all the really bad, dumb ideas are off the table during this Trump administration. How much good things we can get done with a 53-vote Senate and a bare majority in the House. I mean, we'll put it out there, but how much we can actually get done sometimes in the way this place functions, I don't know. We'll see, but we're going to give it our best shot.
Doug, we ran out of time. I always love talking to you. Speaking of a fire hose of information, I appreciate your work over the years, and it's a good thing we have an old-fashioned constitutional farmer in Congress, helping the whole country, quite frankly. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Sure, I enjoyed it. Thank you, fellas, for having me, and let's do it again. I mean, I could go all day, as you know, but I want people to understand. Want them to understand where things come from. It doesn't come from somebody on a keyboard. It comes from somebody being out in that field, in that ditch, in that mine, in that forest, And those things make us more fire safe. They make our economy strong. They source our things that, we source our food supply from people like me and my neighbors instead of some other country that doesn't care about us. And so people have to understand that. And I hope the people in Southern California that are suffering this right now, tragically, will take a hard look at that and say, those Republicans are always so scary or whatever, and get hung up on one silly issue that's really, instead of looking at the big picture of what it means for their family, their livelihood, their neighborhood, the whole deal. So I hope we can get some proper attention and some rethinking on it. So anyway, I'm going on here again, but thank you. Thanks for having me, and let's do some more of this.
All right,
Thank you,
you've been
Congressman.
watching Del Beccaro and Hook, and we'll be right back.
All right. Well, welcome back. You're watching Del Beccaro and Hook. And remember, of course, to check us out. Tom, really getting excited about the way the show is going. We're starting to grow. And in order to keep that going, we want to remind you, check us out on, let's see, Rumble. It's like a laundry list here. Rumble, YouTube, patriot.tv/DHED. And, of course, our friends over at X American News. And don't forget the new website, delandhook.com. That's Del and Hook, one word, delandhook.com. Because Tom's name was so long, people were getting tired of typing it on the. So is it 2 R's or 2 C's? Is it 1 O? Anyway, it's delandhook.com. Man, oh man, Tom, Congressman LaMalfa, man, that was great.
I love him. He's just plain spoken about it. He's not. He's like the living opposite of Obama, where
common sense.
Where Obama will talk for 45 minutes and you never know what he said, but Doug LaMalfa is just nonstop clarity. And that's what I love about him. But there's not enough of people like that in Congress. And there's not enough of people like that in public service. I don't know if you listen to the sentencing of President Trump.
Unbelievable.
And listen, I was listening to the district attorney that was in there. And quite honestly, this is what gives attorney, I've been an attorney for 37 years. And I'm just so over attorneys. I got to tell you this. And just
99% of them give the rest of them a bad name.
Exactly.
Stephen Wright.
If ever I'm introduced as an attorney, I'd repeat that. But they just to listen to his smarmy way of saying, I'm going to paraphrase here. Trump nearly brought on the apocalypse, but we don't think he should be sentenced at all. That he should, no crime, no fine. Yeah. I mean,
it was ridiculous. It was all they wanted to do was embroider the red letter on his chest and then say, that's enough. He's got to walk around forever. And he's a convicted felon now. Of course, all this crap is going to get tossed in the end anyway, but it's just.
Yeah, the first president in history, right? That's what they want to do. But the more they do that, the more they push the American voter away from them. They don't want to hear that. And, the economy and inflation and all these issues are going to be first on their mind. And of course, we know as the president-to-be has said, that there's just landmines being left by the Biden administration left and right, which are going to make his job more difficult. And, Congressman LaMalfa was talking to us about, can't remember whether it was on and off air, about how Republicans need to get their act together because they've got to get these bills done in the first 150 days, because they're not going to have 2 and 3 years to do this sort of thing. And they can't have separate agendas. I get it that you may care more about, in a normal circumstance, they may care more in this state or that state about a particular issue. But 100% of them have to check their ego and their re-election efforts to get this tax bill renewed, because that actually is what's going to determine whether they get re-elected to help
Agreed.
the economy.
Agreed. I mean, they all need to row in one direction, because this is the slightest majority in 77 years in the U.S. House. And I suspect that we're going to see a lot of EOs coming out of this White House in the first 6 months, probably the first 6 minutes, if we're honest. But I think that there's probably a lot of executive actions that are going to be looked at, because Mike Johnson's going to, I mean, Newt Gingrich used to say it's like herding cats. This is like that, plus nailing Jell-O to the wall while trying to herd cats. I mean, it's not going to be easy. So
nailing Jell-O to the wall
while trying to herd cats, that's no easy feat, my friend.
It's January 225, and I've never heard the line Jell-O to the wall.
Well, you can't say that.
You've actually had some good lines today, Steve. What did you get? Rodney Dangerfield's writer or something? What happened here?
Yeah, that's it.
I'm not used to you being funny. Andy, do you recall him being funny before?
Never. You're always the only funny person.
I dipped into the old borscht belt there, Tom, for you. So some borscht
Did you
belt.
hear Annie's sarcasm there? I'm not saying it's dripping, but the electricity in my computer flashed when she said that.
Well, I will say this in seriousness, though. This thing with Marshawn it was the last bite at the apple. It failed miserably. It was a rotten apple, and nobody.
Is that a reference to New York City? See, Annie, he's on a complete run.
I didn't even when I don't know I'm doing it. But I would just say that nobody helped the Donald Trump reelection effort more than Alvin Bragg, more than Marshawn, this judge. And they just can't stop themselves, Tom, but there it is.
Yeah, no question about it. We got to wind up here, but the reality is that the Republicans even with all of that, they have a very short window here, and it's going to be super important. So we're hitting 2 episodes a week now, folks. My producer told us to
get ready.
You of that. So we had Doug LaMalfa today, and then tomorrow we're going to have another episode. We're going to hit on the LA fire from a different angle with my friend Brian Sussman. That'll be a great show. And then going forward, we're going to have 2 shows. We need you to share this with people. This is, at the end of the day, I do this. I love it. Steve loves it, but we would like to grow the show. So we need your help. So whether you're on YouTube, whether you're on Patriot.tv, Rumble, and everywhere else,
Ex-American News,
we need to get you to share this. So we appreciate you tuning in, and we will see you tomorrow.
Goodbye.